Really not a spokesperson of anyone. I'm a concerned citizen who has serious concerns with this ordinance, and I'm glad to hear that the mayor has withdrawn his support from it, because that effectively kills this ordinance.
Great. All right, I was misinformed. What first brought this to your attention?
My wife received an email from one of her many contacts that said, hey, there's an ordinance being considered by the Provo City Council that has some really serious implications for law-abiding citizens in the city, and we should take a look at it.
So do you have kids of your own?
I do. I have three. We have three kids, 13, 11, and 10.
Do you feel that they are threatened by this ordinance?
I do feel that my children are particularly at risk by this ordinance, and that is because we have chosen to home educate our children. And so this ordinance would have given police officers the authority to detain and interrogate my children anytime they were out in a public place, during what they term truancy hours, which is essentially when the Provo City School District is holding classes.
Okay, so how did the news that this was removed come across to you?
Well, first of all, this has not been removed. But what happened this morning is that there was a letter sent by Mayor Curtis withdrawing the administration's support of this proposed ordinance. And so at this point, as far as I know, it is still on the agenda of the Provo City Council. It could still come to a vote, although it's extraordinarily unlikely now that the main proponent of the ordinance has publicly withdrawn his support for that ordinance. And I received a copy of that letter this morning.
Great. Now we did hear from the chair of the council that they are going to comply with the mayor's request and remove it. Does that feel like a victory for you?
Well, actually, I greet this with kind of mixed feelings. On the one hand, the threat of this ordinance becoming a law this week is now extraordinarily remote, such that it's nicely approximated by zero. However, I'm not sure that this isn't just a political move, by the administration to say, wow, the citizens are, upset about this. There's virtually no chance that the council would pass this tonight. Let's remove it from consideration, wait for things to calm down, and then bring in something very similar at a later time. So I would much have preferred that this went before the council and was simply defeated by the council to vote it down. At this point now, it's not dead. The mayor has said, we still want to do something similar. We want to make sure we've got citizens involved in deciding how it's going to happen, get good representation from charter schools, home schools, other interested parties, and try to bring this forward. Politically, it was a brilliant move by the mayor. Unfortunately, I think it keeps some legislation similar to this alive.
Great. You were saying that. Oh man, I had a great question. It was a really good one. Oh my gosh, where did it go? Let's see. Oh yeah. So what do you feel should be done about the rising truancy problem?
Well, the truancy problem is a pretty easy one, I think, to deal with from my perspective. Maybe easy is the wrong word, but the approach is pretty clear. There's really no question who has a truancy problem, or which students are the truant students. Schools keep very good attendance records. They're required to for their funding. They've got to be able to say we had this many pupils in this in this school for this time. And when a student is gone from school, he shows up the next day and he's got an excuse from his parent. My son was homesick. We were at the doctor or whatever. If he can't produce a note like that, well, someone presumably works with him to figure out what it was, and ultimately if it's not resolved, that person is marked as a truant. The school knows exactly which pupils are truant. Current state law gives the school district very broad authority to deal with truancy. In fact, it specifically says you can seek the help of local law enforcement as appropriate. One of the interesting things in the current state law, there are some restrictions about how you deal with truancy. For instance, there's a thing that's called a notice of truancy. I'm not sure exactly what this is, but it's some kind of a formal report that goes from the school to the parent of a truant student. It's a report that says your student has been truant and we really need to address this. The state says, look, we don't want you to be sending this note out to just any truant. There are some requirements. Number one, the student must have been truant for at least 5 days before this kind of report goes out. don't be sending it out on a first offense. Number two, and this is the one that's really problematic for the current situation, is it says it's not allowed to go out to any truant who's under 12 years of age. We're not going to send this out to 9-year-olds or 8-year-olds, to the parents of 8-year-olds. That's inappropriate. I'm not sure exactly why the statute says that or why the state legislature thinks that's inappropriate, but they do. That's what the law says. What was really troubling about this, and the language is clear in the proposed ordinance, it says, look, we are going to define a compulsory school-aged minor as, someone who is between the ages of 6 and 18, so all the way down to 6 years of age, who's supposed to be in school. That's what you're compelled to be in school, and if you're not exempted for some reason, you are a compulsory school-age minor. This ordinance gave authority to police to arrest compulsory school-age minors who were truant. And so even though the state law says, we don't want to do anything as harsh as sending home a letter to the parent for anyone who's younger than 12, this says Provo city officers have the authority to arrest a 6-year-old truant on a first offense. It really contravenes the intent of the state law on truancy.
Great, that was fantastic. Thank you very much.
I was pleased to share that with
Oh,
you.
did you have more?
There's one more point that I think was really important about this, and that is that it was there were specifically 3 ways that you could become a offender under this law. One is that you could be a truant student, and that's the one that's been talked about mostly. The second one was if you were a parent of a truant student who was not exercising adequate control over your child to prevent him or her from becoming a truant, and you knew that this truancy behavior was continuing and you still failed to exert that control, then that would be a crime for the parent because of the actions of the child. Presumably also because of the inaction of the parents to prevent that action from happening. That's a problem for me from a public policy perspective. But the one that's more chilling is the third way that you could offend under this. It was an offense for any owner or employee of an establishment, and the way an establishment is defined in the proposed ordinance is, a for-profit entity. So not-for-profit entities like BYU, it doesn't even apply to them. But a place like, McDonald's or Burger King or, Wendy's, any grocery store, these would be establishments under this code. And what it said is that if you knowingly allow a minor to stay in your establishment, a compulsory school-age minor, someone who's supposed to be in school, in your establishment during truancy hours, you are committing a felony, a misdemeanor, a crime. It's a Class B misdemeanor. It criminalizes this behavior of saying, well, there's a kid here probably supposed to be in school, but I'm not going to say anything. That would be a crime if the person knows he should have been there. But the ordinance specifically says, there's a defense. There's a way that you can be sure that you won't, be prosecuted, for this crime. All you have to do is tell the minor to leave. And if the minor refuses to leave, call the police. And if you've done those 2 things, you'll be exempt from prosecution under this ordinance. It's chilling. It requires business owners and employees to say, you're a minor, school's in session, get out. And if you don't leave, I'll call the police. And from the perspective of the business owner or employee, if they didn't engage in that behavior, it would be a crime. And that's chilling. That's Germany in 1939. People being required to report, and not even a real crime, to report that someone is breaking an ordinance that says you're supposed to be in school, and if you're out, I've got to report you. It's chilling. But this is what the ordinance said.
And now it's effectively gone.
And now the ordinance as it currently is, the proposal to turn this proposed ordinance into a law of the city of Provo is virtually dead. But the mayor has said, we still like the approach. We want to do something similar. We are going to make sure we listen to the right shareholders so that we don't have this kind of response in the future. But in principle, the mayor's office still says, generally we think this is a pretty good idea. And that's still troubling.
Great. I appreciate it. That was fantastic. Thank you. I would like to get that you're a professor. What are you a professor of?
I'm a professor of information systems in the business school, the Marriott School of Management.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
One of the really troubling things one of the really troubling things of this particular ordinance is that it gives officers the authority to approach someone who appears to be under the age of 18. At BYU, we admit over 400, close to 500 students a year who are, in fact, under the age of 18. And there's another large group who look like they're under the age of 18. I think it's from all the healthy living. They look youthful and vibrant. And this would require them really to be able to identify themselves if they were to go into the city of Provo, to any business establishment or public place during truancy hours. You know, when school's in session, you know, even if they're cutting class from BYU, you know, that doesn't matter. You know, we shouldn't have to be held to answer to be able to say, yes, I am 18, I'm an adult, or I am a BYU student. I'm allowed to be at a bookstore, you know, at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's ridiculous. And that would have had a tremendous effect on BYU students. They'd have to carry their BYU IDs everywhere they went, or really face the threat of being arrested.
Great, thank you. Let me, okay.